Hey, fourth grade, Mrs. Collier here with a little PA history for you. We're looking at Chapter 9, Lesson 2, The Civil War Ends. This is where we finish up our chapter on PA history. Next week we'll move into science. But today we're looking at how the Civil War ended. Again, keep in mind, as you're reading, you want to think about who's involved, what's happening, where is it happening, and when is it happening? They're the key questions you want to always ask yourself when you're reading, especially about history. So let's start at the top, nearing the end. The town of Chambersburg, located close to Pennsylvania's southern border, suffered two Confederate raids, or sudden attacks, during the war. In 1862, Confederate troops had ridden into the town long enough to take supplies and horses. In July 1864, Confederate forces once again crossed the Mason-Dixon line into Chambersburg. The Mason-Dixon line, established in 1767, is the boundary between Pennsylvania and Maryland. This boundary is considered the line between the North and the South. Chambersburg was a major railroad hub, or transportation center, for the North, connecting important railways to Washington. The Confederates demanded $100,000 in gold. When the people of Chambersburg refused, the soldiers burned much of the town, leaving two-thirds of the people homeless. In 1864, General Ulysses S. Grant was in charge of the Union forces, which had already gained complete control of the Mississippi Valley. Grant then ordered Union troops into Georgia, where they captured Atlanta and Savannah. On the way to the Shenandoah Valley in Virginia, a group of Union forces won a key battle at Cedar Creek, Virginia. The victory at Cedar Creek moved the Union closer to victory while weakening the Confederate Army. It also helped re-elect President Lincoln. Everyone hoped that the war would end soon. So the battle at Cedar Creek, and we looked at a little bit last week, the battle at Gettysburg. These were just two of the many battles that were fought, trying to fight for what the Confederate and the Union armies believed in. Just a reminder, the Union is the army to the north, and the Confederate army is the army to the south. And they were both fighting over the idea of slavery. The Union, try to remember, what were they for? Were they for or against slavery? They were against slavery, yes. And the South was for slavery. And what do we call those little group of states that kind of fell right between the two? Yep, we called them border states. Those are the states that were kind of mixed with their opinion. But we looked here at the Mason-Dixon line. And the Mason-Dixon line, again, is that boundary between the North and the South. And there's a little video in the Learning Extension section that gives you a little bit more information about that. But I want you to think for a minute. What was the effect of the battle at Cedar Creek? What were they fighting for? What happened? Let me think about that for a second. So what was the effect of the battle at Cedar Creek? Well, if you thought about the victory that helped the North weaken the South, you were right. So this battle actually weakened the South and gave the North a little bit more ground in the victory of the Civil War. So let's go to the next page, where we look at the Confederates finally surrender. So again, the Confederate Army, you guessed it, down south. In April 1865, Grant's forces captured Richmond, Virginia. Confederate General Robert E. Lee surrendered, or gave up, at the town of Appomattox Courthouse Virginia, that was a mouthful, on April 9, 1865. This ended the Civil War. 5 days later, President Lincoln was shot and soon died from his wounds. So President Lincoln didn't even get to really enjoy the victory of the Civil War. Even though he was president at the time, he did pass away shortly after the war ended. More Americans died in the Civil War than any other war. The United States government helped rebuild the South, but it would take a long time to heal the nation's wounds. So if you remember, we talked about in the beginning of the chapter that the Civil War was the only war fought on American soil where we were fighting against each other. We weren't fighting against another country. We were fighting against each other. And there was a lot of bloodshed, a lot of death. But if you think about the victory that took place, it ended slavery. So now we live in a world that's free. All people can be free the way the founding fathers intended it to be. So I want us to think a little bit about what it was like for the two generals that were involved, the general of the North and the general of the South. What was it like for them to have to lead these armies into battle? Think about what it is they had to tell their soldiers to motivate them, what they had to tell the people, the American people, to support their cause. So these are a lot of things that are kind of taking place today, even though we're not in a war with each other, an actual war, but there are a lot of people in this world that don't agree with the way things are done or the laws that are in place. And as Christians, I want us to think about how we can be involved and still stand strong in the idea for Christ. So as you're thinking, do you think that these two generals had any type of belief in God and if they relied on them? I'm sure there's probably biographies out there that will give us a little bit more information about them, but just without knowing anything now, we can sit here and think about, did their actions and their decisions, were they biblically motivated? Did they seek God in all that they did? Makes you wonder. Would be some fun for you to kind of investigate and look into. But I want us to think of us right now. I want us to think of what motivates us, what helps us to fight for what we believe in and to stand up for what's right. Well, it's Jesus. So let's stick with that and keep on praying, keep on reading our scripture to find the truth so that we can stand on that truth. I want you to now review your reading from last week, and you are going to now complete the Google form on all of Chapter 9. That would be from Lessons 1 and 2. Don't forget to submit it for a grade, and check out the Learning Extension page for some more information about the Civil War. Thanks for listening, guys. Bye-bye.